Welcome to the fastest daf in town, Tanil Masechtas Kiddushin Daf Yud Daled. We're going to begin on the very bottom of Yud Gimel Amud Beis. Coming somewhat to the end of this very first Mishnah. So there is only one way in the event that a woman had a husband who died and they were childless, that she is to marry the brother through the act of Yibum, and that is through the act of having Bia. So how do we know that? Bia Minolan. So Amar Kra, as we continue on Yudel Manalef, it's based on the following pasuk. Yavama, Yavo Olah. Sounds pretty explicit. It says that with regard to the Yavama, you shall cohabit with her, you shall have relations with her. Then she's your wife. So therefore, it's clear that's the bia, which is the act of the likucheha. It's the act of taking her. Ve'ema lekuha milsa kiisha, says Rashi. Ma'isha kesav shtar kibia naviyava kesav shtar kibia. How do we know that we should limit it to bia? After all, we also just learned that a person who had Bia was Mekanish with Bia, he would get Malchus. So it's Pritzus. So why would we assume that this is the only way of doing things? You would think that Kesem Shtar could complete it. Just like Bia Talmud Lemer, Vayima. Bia Gomerisba ve'in Kesem Shtar Garmin. So you need Bia to complete the act. Because again, there is a zika. She is already connected to you. So it's not comparable to just be mekanish a woman with bia. Because this is a woman who already has this connection to the man through zika. And the pasuk requires, by you taking her, having her being your wife now, it's necessary to have a gemira. They have to be goymer, to finish something, completing something is with bia only. Ve'ema my vayima de bal karcha miabim. So im kain lemekra vayibein my vayima shma minatarti. So we see from here that taka, if you wish, you could have be with her, even bal karcha, and therefore that in itself would work. And therefore, maybe that's what we wanted this out from. So now we need both psukim. That doesn't mean, again, you're allowed to physically force yourself on her. However, in the event that Yibum takes place in Achalitza, so you can say that this is the way in which we're going to be married. And that's Bal Korcha. But Chalitza, as we know, in the event that they do not want to get married, so Chalitza is performed. Minon, Dachsiv, Nikra, Shemai B'Yisrael. We're going to focus on the word B'Yisrael also. Beis Choltz Anal, the one who removes the shoe. Kivan Shecholtz Banal, once the shoe is removed, which is part of the ceremony of Chalitza, Hutul Chol Yisrael. She's now mutter to marry whomever she wishes. So therefore we see just this one act of Chalitza is enough for her to now be no longer Zokuk to the Yavam, and instead she's able to marry whomever she wishes. Okay. So that's how we derive from here that she's going to be completely mutter. So Hay Yisrael Hachudasa. Is that what has come to tell you, the word Yisrael, that she's now mutter to whomever she wishes? But based in Shal Yisrael, but based in Shal Oivi Kochavim. Or on the Mesorah Sashas says Shal Gerim. Okay. So it says that it has to be Yisrael. Maybe it means not just a Jew, it has to be a Jewish core, not a non-Jewish core, or someone who was born Jewish. Okay. That itself is hard to understand why. Unless you want to say it's in Gezeres HaKos. But nonetheless, we have a kasha. We see clearly that we learn out from Yisrael that the basin has to be Yisrael. And therefore you should be able to learn out that she is free from Chalitza, when she does Chalitza. So Trei Yisrael Ksivi, says Rashi, L'hokim L'ochim Shem Yisrael. You look in the Psukim, it says Yisrael twice. So one is to tell us regarding the basin, and the other one's coming to tell you regarding the din of Chalitza that frees her. Vikati, but nonetheless, still, Miboyle, look at Asanya. Rabbi Yehuda Pamachas Hayinu Yoshim Lifnei Rav Tarfin. I was sitting in front of Rav Tarfin. So there was a woman. Again, it's obviously a terrible, tragic ceremony because it means that her husband just died and they have no kids. So they're about to do chalitz. If Yarmu Lanu, and it was said to us, Anu Kulchem, that we should all answer V'imru Chol Tanoil Chol Tanoil. That we all have to say this as part of the ceremony. We have to make this statement. Now, who Mevenikra Shemo Nafka? That's actually now from a different part of the pasuk, that the people that are present are supposed to say Chol Tanal, but not from the word Yisrael. And how do we know that when her husband dies, just like when her first husband died, let's say with children, that she could marry whomever she wishes, so too the din is when it comes to a Yavam. So when it comes to being married to a regular woman, shehi bechenek, if a person has relations with her, the din is that she is going to be, you'll be chayav chenek, which is obviously a very serious death penalty, but it's chenek. Nonetheless, misas abal mitirata, when her husband dies, even though they have such a strong connection, that a person who would commit adultery, there's a death penalty of chenek. Nonetheless, once he dies, she's free. So yavama she belav kol shekain. If a person has bia with a yavama, so the din is that it's a lav. Says Rashi, shehi belav l'shuk lo tia eshes amesh hachutza leizar. Right. So this is talking about. It's not talking about when she's already married to the Yavam, but when she's zokuk to the Yavam, if someone, an Izar, would have tashish with her, at that point it's a lav. So certainly, lo kosher. So Mali shechein yotz beget, terms of shechein yotz beget. So what are you talking about? It's not a good kabel chaimer. We see by an Eshes Ish, she's able to be freed in many ways. By a Yavam, we don't see that you can give a get. So Hanami yotz b'chalitza, it's not really true because she can leave with chalitza. So therefore, maybe it's still a good kal v'chaymer. Versus elamal shechein oisra matira. That when it comes to an eshes ish, the one who asers is mater her. Says Rashi, shari bala hu oisra. Once he marries her, he's the one who made her aser to everyone else. Lefikach hu matira b'misasai. So since he's the one that caused the problems, if you will, he's the one who asked her, so now that he's no longer alive, he's not in the picture, so she should be mutter. Avol says Rashi, Yavama de Kiddushin de Baal Ka'asrula. The reason why she's aser is not because of the Yavam, it's because of the Yavam's brother. Heich tehe misas hayavam matirasa. So just because the Yavam dies, maybe that doesn't free her, because we see that her original connection is not based on the Yavam, it's by the Yavam's brother. So maybe it's not a good kal v'chaymer. So that's the issue. Mal eshes ishechein oisra matira. Some Rabashi hanami oisra matira. This is also a situation where she becomes aser and then mutter. Yavam oisra, yavam sharila, says Rashi. Kishemes yavam, that when the Yavam dies, nimsa oisra matira. She was usher to everyone else because she was married to the Yavam. Now she should be mutter. The ilav Yavam, because if there was no brother, let's say all she had was just a husband, and that husband was a child with no siblings. Obviously, that once the husband died, then she'd be mutter. So the only reason why she's usher is not because of her husband. She's usher because of the Yavam. Because if there was no brother, then there would be no din yibum, obviously, because there's no brother for her to have married. So therefore, l'chayra, we should learn out from here that what we should say is it's the same thing, and therefore takat's a good kal v'chaymer. And that's actually what we're going to end up saying. Laskana is that's how we're actually going to learn out, at least up until this point, that is how we know misas hayavam. Let's look in question TA 11. Mehecha yalfinan diyavama yoitis b'misas hayavam. So he says, Kavachemer me'eshasish. She bechenek v'yatsu b'misas abal. That's how he says it, and I can't disagree with that. Okay, so that's TA 11. So we know misas hayavam again from the Kavachemer me'eshasish that even though the punishment would be chenek, which is very strong, nonetheless, once he dies, she's free. So the yavam, which is a lav, will kol shekain. Okay. Okay. So now the Gemara continues using kavachayimers. It says, we know that a regular woman, she goes out only with get or misas habal. But maybe she should also be able to go out with chalitza, using the following kavachayimer. We know a yavama can't go out with a get, but she can with chalitza. So zu and eshasi sheyatza beget, and then sheyatza b'chalitza. So since she does go out also with a get, maybe chalitza would also work to free her. Across sefer krisa, sefer kursa made a bracha kurta. The pasuk says explicitly it's a sefer krisus, so it has to be daf get and not chalitza. Even though it sounds like a good kavachayimer, the pasuk says it has to be a sefer krisus. Today yavama it says beget b'kavachayimer. So let's flip it around. Maybe yavama should be able to go out with a get. When it comes to a married woman, we already established chalitza doesn't work, but she can go out with a get. So zu, a yavama shiyatz b'chalitza, then shiyatz b'get. So merkra kacha, the kacha ikuva. Says this is how it should be, as the pasuk says. Rashi quotes Yasa Shelo Yivne. So since it says that this is the way to do things, it comes to exclude, it's a miyat to any other way. Gemara says 1 second. Ikuva lo darshi kavachaymer. Whenever you have a pasuk which has like an ikuv, like kacha, it's very specific. This is how it should be. So then you're telling me that you're not allowed to darsh the kavachaymer in whenever you have such a word in a parsha. Lasanya. The pasuk says as follows: V'yasahu chatos. So it says that you shall do a chatos. Now, what is this referring to? So Rashi says, okay, we didn't get to this yet, but hagaro asachatos ve'ein Hashem oisachatos. So it's necessary only through a gairul, only through a lottery system. That is the way you're able to choose the seirim, the he-goats, but you can't, ein Hashem oisachatos. Just only designating it doesn't work. You need to do the lottery. A decoration is not enough. That's what we say. Now, when it comes to the seirim, it must be done in this particular way, that you must use a lottery system. Maybe you can think there are many times in which you cannot use a lottery, but nonetheless you could just designate it as Makadish something. So maybe in a case where you could do a lottery, you certainly should be able to be Makadish with a b'shem. It says V'asahu chatos, which is telling you this is the way that it is created. Only this way. It says Rashi, Seir shigayrol Hashem oil of oisachatos. Only that way makes a chatos. And Hashem, not based on a decoration. Now, v'taima dimyate kra. The only reason why we said it doesn't work when it comes to the seirim is because the pasuk explicitly excludes it. Even though it says the word chukah in the pasuk, nonetheless, which is an ikuva, you would think the ikuva would already throw out the kavachamer. No, we need a pasuk to get rid of the kavachamer. Why need a pasuk to get rid of the kavachamer? I thought we just said when it comes to the din of a yavama, that since it says the word kacha, that throws out the kavachamer. So maybe that's not true. So Makra la v'lo yavama. So the Gemara ends up saying that. Actually, let's slow down. Let's look at this Rashi. Shiyachol. Karmel hachi itzur haikra You think, in a case where you can't do a lottery system, when it comes to birds, one bird is a chatas, one is an oila. If you chose which bird is a chatas or an oila based on a lottery system, it doesn't work. And therefore you could switch it around, as it brings in the Gemara, it says in Seder Yoima, Ein hakinim misparshos el obekichas balim obisias kain. Actually, the Gemara says this in many places, that the only time that we designated these birds is either at the time of the purchase or when the kohen is actually engaged in the avoda, but cannot be done with a garul. So therefore, again, that's the chiddush over here. So the Gemara ends up saying, actually, the drasha is because it says the cost of law. And since it says law v'lo yavama, how do we know that a woman, you cannot, who's a yavama, you can't write a get? Because it says you write it to her, because of law, to her, not to yavama. Ve'em law l'shma. So trey law ksivi, you're right. We also learn out l'shma, that it has to be written l'shma, or it has to be, whether you hold it the chasima karti, in Masira Karti, whether it's the Ksiva needs to be Lishma, the Chasima. So Trey lo Ksivi. So V'yakantam B'boli Echad lo Lishma, V'idach lo V'loi lo V'lechaverta. Says Rashi, what does that mean? Lo V'lechaverta, which we saw in Gittin, I think also in Sota. So it says Rashi, Shamais and Shaman, let's say their names are the same. You can't use the same get. Say, my name's George and her name is Wendy, and happens to be I'm getting divorced, and my neighbor has the same names as us. So we'll just duplicate. I'll use the get. I'll give it to her, to give it to him, to give it to her. In kasav plain migarish plain is nashav. Doesn't work like that. Also. Okay. El oimer kra. So how do we know all this? Because we already need it for Lishma, and we need it for Lav Chaverta. El Omer Kra Noel. Noel in Midachrin Eloi. It's saying that when it comes to Chalitza, it must be with the shoe, not with a get. Behind Noel Hachudasa. Is that what we learn out from? Hamaboy, look at the sign. You know, Eloi Eloi. Now shall call Adam Eloi. How do we know? Even if it's not his shoe, it's someone else's. You borrow someone else's shoes, like in a bowling alley. Talmud Omer, Nile, no Riva. The fact that it says Nile, so that is coming to include other shoes. It means a shoe. It doesn't have to be his. It has to be a shoe which is fit for it to be his, potentially. So what does that come to exclude? Let's say it's so big, you have these like clown shoes that you can't walk in them. So that's not considered to be shaykh to be naloi. It has to be something that you physically are capable of walking in. Or the shoe is so small it doesn't even cover the majority of your foot. Prat also comes to exclude. We continue to Yudalad of Advays. Limit suloyim she'ein loy akev. These types of shoes which have no heel. So even Cain, Nechtav Kranal, Mein Hanal, Shemamina, Tarti. What are two things? Okay. Question 11. Man Nilmad Mehakasu Beparshas Get Law Trey Zimni. What do we went out from law? Law is Lashma, law Velo Lachaberta. Okay. Okay. And Man Nilmad Mehakasu Beparshas Gershon. The cost of law, lo lishma, lo chaverta, and that's it. Okay, that was TB12. Let me mark that down. TB12. Okay. All right. Yudalad Medbeis, new Mishnah. Can you imagine? We actually are getting to a second Mishnah. So we're talking about the ways in which you can acquire a woman, a yavama. So now, next masnisin, Eved Ivri Nikd B'Kesav Ishtar. You can acquire an Eved Ivri, a Jewish slave, and the Gemara is going to explain how we know this, just like we did at length with regard to a woman, with money or star. But Kain Atzmo How does an Eved Ivri go free? Bishanim, after a certain amount of years, or actually says at the end of 6 years, the pasuk says, Yoitzi Chavshi, he'll go free. Uvi Yoivel, let's say he was only working for 3 years, and all of a sudden it's the Yovel year, he goes free. He doesn't have to work for 6 years. He works maximum 6 years, but if Yovel is before that time, he goes free. And we also had this before, Uvi Garya and Kesef, and the deduction of money, which we said, so a mushal, if let's say he's working for 6 years, we evaluate how much he's worth those 6 years, and therefore, if let's say he has a year left, instead of him working that last year, he could end up basically buying his freedom. Okay. When it comes to an Amavriya, she goes free with simanim of simani nairus, which obviously means an Amavriya is not going to be a woman who's 30 years old. She has to be a young girl, because when she shows simani nairus, she goes free. Hanirtza nikne b'ritzia, and one, as we're going to see, it's possible that you could work more than the 6 years. If he says that he wishes to stay, he can become a nirtza. We'll talk about that process. And he's, which is called ritzia, going, as we're going to see, to the door, and he has his ear, puts a hole through it with an awl, A-W-L. Even a nirtza will go free once it's yovel. So again, let's say he finishes 6 years, and then 2 years later is yovel. So he's only going to be an Eved Ivri for another 2 years. Or if his master dies. Well, what do you mean? How does Yarshim? So Rashi says, "Ve'enu oived as Yarshav." When it comes to an Eved Ivri, he doesn't get acquired so much. When we see it's not Gufa Kanai like an Eved Kanani, and therefore the din is that he doesn't belong. His work is owed to this master, but not himself. So once his master dies, he goes free. Gemara. Eved Ivri nikne b'kesem anon. How do you know? So Amar b'kesem b'knasai. Pasuk says regarding an Eved Ivri who is sold to an Avid Kachavim, right? An Eved Ivri is sold to Avid Kachavim. It says b'kesem b'knasam. Olam mishenikne b'kesem. So Ashachan Eved Ivri hanim b'chol Avid Kachavim. Hoya b'chol kinyan b'kesem. We know that when it comes to Avid Kachavim, they're not kaina with Mashicha. The only time when it comes to metaltalin, we're going to talk about how you're kaina karka, when you're kaina metaltalin generally Mashicha by pulling it. However, when it comes to Avid Kachavim, they're kaina with kesef, even metaltalin. So therefore, maybe only when a Jewish slave gets sold to a non-Jew, to an Avid Kachavim, the din is that the Avid Kachavim owns the Eved Ivri with kesef. Nimcho yisumanon. How do we know? Also, if the Eved Ivri is sold to a Jew, so we see that his you can be paid to yourself and go free. So therefore, obviously, says Rashi, Alma b'kesef nikna. It must be you could be acquired with money. De'ilo kana b'damim my migar. What are you deducting? Right? It must be. Originally, he was bought for $6,000, and then the last year, you can pay off the last $1,000. But how would you have been able to make that calculation if it wasn't with kesef? Okay, that's a little bit difficult, because does that mean we know that you can be kain and Eved Ivri with a star? So then, how do you do Gurin kesef? You should be able to still do it by just doing an assessment. Okay, so Ashchan Amahavriya. So I can understand. If we're talking about Amavriya Hoyel, Mikach B'Kesef, Mikani B'Kesef. Since a woman could, as we already established, can marry her with Kesef, so therefore you can also acquire an Amavriya the same way, right? Because she's a Jewish slave. So just like an Amavriya, she's Jewish. So if you want, you can marry her with Kesef, or she can become your Eved with Kesef. So Eved Ivri Manon, how do we know a Jewish man? So Makra. Ki yimachel achicha ha'ivri, when you sell a Jewish slave, ha'ivriya, So whatever the dinim of an Avriya are, so even though it sounds more pashut that Kesef works by an Avriya, it'll also work by an Eved Ivri. So Ashkan, Machur Beistin. I can understand all these cases if he was sold by Beistin. Says Rashi, Beginei Vasai, that what ends up happening was that he owed money because he stole, and now the Beistin will intervene and sell him so that this person who he stole from, because now he doesn't have any money, he'll be able to get reimbursed. He's being sold against his will. So how do we know if an Eved Ivri just decides, I want to sell myself for whatever reason? This is what he wants to do. So y'all sacher. So another Gzer Shava, says Rashi. When it comes to selling yourself, it says you're poor and you have no food. So you know what? Let me just become an Eved Ivri. And this way I'll know I'll have my meals taken care of, I'll have shelter. Okay, so I'll work. So therefore, since we have the same words, we say the dinim are the same. And this is those, of course, who you have to hold as this Gzer Shava. Assume you hold as the Gzer Shava. So we say, just like when it comes to being sold, but based in, it could be with kesef, so too if you sell yourself. What if you don't have this kavachaymer? V'chi sasig. Now in this pasuk, it says v'chi sasig, and Rashi says b'moicher atzmo l'avichavim. We're talking about a case where he sold himself to a non-Jew. V'samchu l'parshas moicher atzmo l'Yisrael. And it's comparable to the case of him selling himself to a Yid. So there's a connection between selling himself to an Avacham and selling himself to a Yid. And it has a Vav, which is Vav Achibor. So since we already established that an Evid, that you are able to be sold to an Avakachavim with Kesef, because all their kinyanim were with Kesef, so it's pretty obvious. So too, because of the Chisasig, even if you don't hold a Sacher, you can still learn out the din from Avakachavim, that just like an Avakachavim can purchase an Eved Ivri with money, so too, if a person is Meicher Atzmo, because it's written right next to it, it's Smichas Parshis, it's juxtaposed, they can also with money. So man tanadul yel sacher. So now that brings us to a sidebar question: who doesn't hold of this really great kavachomer? So haitanu desanya hamaycher atzmo. When a person sells himself, nimchul sheish, he's sold for 6 years. V'yeser al sheish, he could even be sold for longer than that. So this is obviously someone who doesn't learn out sacher, because sacher compares mechira from Beisdin to Mechiras Atzma. But over here we're going to see that there's distinctions. That only when Beisdin sells you, the pasuk says, V'avdacha sheish shanim. But it doesn't say 6 years if you sell yourself. So maybe if you sell yourself, you can actually, according to this opinion, you can sell yourself for longer than 6 years. Hamarcha Atzma enu nirtza, v'achor Beisdin nirtza. The only time there's a din nirtza is only if Beisdin does it. That's a second chiluk. The third difference is Meicher Atzmo, Ein ma'nikim loy, however, machur beisin ma'nikim loy. There's a din of hanaka, that when the Eved Ivri goes free, you don't just throw him out into the street and say, get out of here. You have to give him some like severance package. You have to give them some gifts, as we'll see what those gifts are, as the Torah explicitly says what they are. We'll get to that soon. But that is only when it comes to Beistin. And finally, Hamaycher Atzmo ein Rabba Meisel Hashem Chanainis. Ma'achor Beistin Rabba Meisel Hashem Chananis. So let's say a person is sold by Beistin. So in addition to working, also the master can give you a Shem Chananis, which is interesting. An Eved Ivri, a Jewish man, according to the Torah, is allowed to be married to a non-Jewish woman if she's a Shivcha Kananis, which is a very fascinating concept, because the Shivcha Kananis is considered to be like owned by the Adain. And therefore, this is a heter, as hard as it to imagine, that an Eved Ivri is allowed to actually marry a non-Jew. It's not necessarily considered marriage, but it's for be able to reproduce. So an Eved Ivri can have a Shivcha Kananis, but only if he was sold by Beis Din. And it makes sense if you think about it. Let's say, well, Moshel, you have this guy that wants to marry this Shivcha Kananis, this non-Jewish girl, right? And so he'll just, in order to do that, he'll just sell himself to this guy, and all of a sudden he's going to be with the Shivcha Kananis. No, only a Beis Din does it, which is against his will. But for him to wish to do so, we don't allow it. Okay, so that is a difference when it comes to four differences. Again, the amount of years, whether you can become a nirtza, whether you get gifts, and whether you can have a shivcha kananis. All those four things, we make a distinction. That's only when it comes to a Beis Din, not if you're moichatzmai. So therefore, obviously, it means you don't hold sachar. So Rabbi Elazar oimer zev zeh inu nimchor el l'sheish, v'zev zeh nirtza, v'zev zeh manikan loy, v'zev zeh rabbi moisel shel kananis. Ma'ila b'hakim ifli. This Tanakama lo yav sachar. Rabbi Elazar yav sachar. Pretty obvious that must be the basis of the machlokas, whether you hold it as gzer shava. So Amarav Tav Yomi Mishmei Del Bayis and then no. The Kuli Yom Yav Sachar. Really, they all hold of Sachar. So, 1 second, if you hold like Sachar, so why do we make a distinction in these four areas? They argue about the Psukim. My time in the Tanakama. Why are you able to work for more than 6 years? It's not doing Sachar. Yeah, we do hold of Sachar. It's Mir Rachmana Gabi Machur Beis Din, because the pasuk explicitly only mentions when you sell the Beis Din. It says V'avdachei Sheishanim Zeh V'lo Moicher Atzmo. The pasuk says explicitly only this guy. So really, we could make a Gezer Shava, but if there are psukim that tell us that they're not exactly the same in certain regards, then we have to respect what the psukim say as a miyut. And therefore, even though you do hold this the Gezer Shava, the pasuk Davka says when it comes to mechira from Beis Din, is it 6 years? So what does he do with this pasuk? According to the other shita, it seems pretty obvious, Rabbi Elazar, that we should be excluding someone who has sold himself. No, but Abdacha l'chav l'ol yarish. It means you're going to work for him, but not a yarish, l'ol yarishin, which I think is what this Rashi is. De'enu oivid lo habas v'os ha'ach im ein lo ben. Oivid who has a ben can come on. We'll see that you still have to work for his son, but you don't work for his daughter, his brother. Let's say he has no son. Okay, so that's what it's saying. You work for him for 6 years, but no one else. That's the pasuk. That's what it's coming to tell you. Okay. There's another pasuk that says v'abdacha v'idach hahu hartzas adain hudasa. It's just coming to appease the master. Says Rashi, hartzos al haniko shul yikshu be'enav can mafarish kra. Again, it should be that there's this obligation of giving gifts, and we should appease the master to do so. So if in fact you hold of Sachar, so then why do we say he can't be a Nirtza? Because only by it says by Machur Beis Din, it says the din Nirtza. Nirtza Adainavis Aznai B'Martzeh, his ear. Aznu Shalov Aznu Shalmaicher Atzmo, not someone else, not someone who sold himself, as we can do test of Abu Manal. Va'idach. What does he do with this apparent miyut? No, hahi u'gzer shavahudas. It's a different thing. It's come to teach us. The Sanya Rabbi Elazar Omer menayin l'ritziyah shehim oizin nimonis. How you're supposed to do the right ear? Never kan oizin v'nemer loholon oizin. Ma loholon yamin afkan yamin. So it says Rashi regarding mitzayra oni shekol partial drasha. So it says, because it's all repeated, so it's come to as a miyut, as a drasha, that when it comes to someone who has saras, that you're supposed to put the blood on the right ear, not the left. right? So therefore, that's part of the process. Behoyin Yemonis on the thumb and by the Shar Niknor, as we see many places. That's why not where all the doors were Kadosh, not Shar Niknor. Okay. Anyway, the Idach, how does he know it's supposed to be on the right ear? In Kain Limikra Oizin, my Ozno tells you two things. Again, only Machur Beistin and also the right ear. Idach, Ahoma Boile Oznovel Ozna. That there's a din of Nirtza only works when it comes to a man, to an Eved Ivri, not to an Amavriya. Says Rashi, V'afla Mascha Tasakain Ahanakakoi. When it says also you should do this for the Amavriya, it's not referring to the Nirtza. She doesn't become a Nirtza. She works 6 years and that's it. Especially, that's it. So therefore, the only reason why it says we treat her the same is regarding Hanaka, gifts. It says Eved explicitly. What does it say Eved? Only while he is still an Eved. Lo Dorish. Okay, that explains two of them, and we'll have to stop here because it's going to just pour even further down, and therefore we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. But again, everyone holds Sachar. So the whole idea is there's actually two ways that we learn out that an Eved Ivri is kind of you can acquire with Kesef. We know already when it comes to a non-Jew who buys him, obviously it can be with Kesef. So the question is, do we use V'chisasig to tell us, because you maybe don't hold of Sachar, therefore the din is that just like Ovikachavim, so too a person's Moicher Atzmo, because it's written next to each other, that's why he can be acquired with Kesef. Or is it because of Sachar that just like Machor Beis Din, so to Machor Atzmo, the din is the same, they can be kind with Kesef. Adkan.